What's up, everybody? Doug here again, and a bunch of new things going on today. Starting off, I'm trying off Ghost Energy, which is it's just another energy drink that we have here, and the Phase Pop flavor is probably my new favorite energy drink. And the only reason I even tried it is they had a 2 for $5 special going. And first off, I mean that's just the first new thing going on here. Second new thing is I'm actually very excited because Emily wants me to make her a PC gaming setup. So there's two things on the agenda when I get home. The first thing is I'm going to get her all set up. I'm going to get her a monitor, a keyboard, mouse, all the works. And then what I'm going to do after she's all completely set up, I am actually going to be taking an older PC that I have kind of kept in storage. I'm gonna pop that sucker open, and I'm gonna see if I can salvage some parts and combine it with a newer PC that I have to kind of bolster up the performance. Because I mean, honestly, I think I'm done with console gaming. I really do. Uh, Everything that I want to play eventually comes to PC. If it's not on PC from day one, so yeah. So that's just a couple things going on. Uh, but other than that, let's go ahead and get into the intro for the show. Uh, if you haven't listened to it yet, this is going to be part two of the handheld gaming episodes. If you haven't listened to that, go check out handheld gaming part one. Also, I did an episode where I talk about my love as games as a service. Uh, there's an episode that we did where we said goodbye to the Xbox 360 because the store got shut down. That was a great episode. It was actually combined with part one of handheld gaming. It was the inspiration of how I'm doing part two, and we're going to get into that in a minute. But also, there is the episode where I review Shift 87, Primal Survivors, and Reveal. You can find all of those on our podcast feed. But if you want written reviews, uh, written versions of our reviews, you can go over to the nightrideHomePodcast.com the nightrideHomePodcast.wordpress.com. You can subscribe to us there, and you can get all of our written reviews as they are published. Um, I'm not, I'm, I don't think I have subscribed to things, so you should get like an email whenever we post something. Uh, with all that out of the way, yesterday we did the Xbox 360, the farewell to the console, and it sounds more dramatic than it is. I mean, you can still play 360 games, you just can't go in the store anymore. But going through and talking about all of the fantastic games and the games that really defined me in that era, it got me thinking that is how I'm going to tackle the rest of this series because uh, Nintendo. We stopped at the Nintendo DS last week, or the last in part one. The PSP is where we're going to start. We're going to cover the PSP, the PS Vita, and the Nintendo 3DS today, and those were the. Uh, I mean, really, the PSP and the 3DS were my biggest launches into handheld gaming because it was the first time that we saw what handheld gaming could really be. But the PlayStation Vita also holds a special spot in my heart. So we're going to go through. We're going to talk about my favorite games on the console, whether the handheld, whether they be good, whether they be bad, and yeah. So the PSP is where, like I said, that's where we're going to start. And this system was so special to me for multiple reasons. One of which being that it was the first handheld that I had that had an online store. I don't remember if it launched with it. I would bet that it did not. But I mean, being able to buy digital games was definitely such a big deal. And it was, I'm pretty sure the PSP Go was the first fully digital system because I mean it was like like a slide phone. I mean this thing was very small, and you kind of just like slid it up, and you had all your controls and the slide part. Uh, but yeah, the PSP had like three different revisions, and every one was a little bit different. The PSP original, I actually have one because our neighbor gave it to us, and they're like, "Here, you can give this to your kids," but our kids are ungrateful little idiots, and they did not appreciate the PSP because they could just play, on a Switch. So I've got the original PSP, the piano black PSP, and this is kind of like a little chunky boy, but I mean, by today's standards, it's still very tiny. And then the PSP 2000 was slimmer, and I don't remember what the difference between the 2000 and the 3000 were. Uh, it might have been better battery life, maybe. I can't remember if I'm being 100% honest with you. But they all ran off of these weird little UMD discs, and there were they had this in the Game Boy too. I forgot to talk about it in part one. But the Game Boy had cartridges with TV shows on them, and the PSP had the same thing, but it was full movies. Like I remember it being a big deal. You could watch Spider-Man 2 and maybe even 3 on the PSP. Uh, I had a movie, but I don't remember what it was. But it was not even just the gaming aspect. It was a multimedia machine because you could connect your PSP to your computer, and you can like send your songs, and you can import your own movies onto the system. And they had the proprietary memory cards, and that's something that carried over to the Vita. But I mean, this was just such a special handheld, and it was the first time that I was able to readily get into online gaming because, like we talked about in the Xbox episode, there was not a wireless feature built into the 360, so you had to get an adapter. But the PSP had it built in; it had a wireless adapter built into it. Uh, and it had it had online play, and it also had local play. I mean, it was just a fantastic system to get people into gaming. And we're gonna go ahead and get into some of the games that really made it special. And I'm looking at my list here, and I'm thinking where we're just gonna go down the list. So I mean, it's gonna we're gonna get to some big games first, and we're gonna kind of slowly work our way down to the not so big games. But I mean, just starting it off with Metal Gear Solid, Portable Ops, and Peace Walker. Uh, you also had Portable Ops Plus, which was like an expansion, but I don't think it was like I think it was just more missions that you could play. So I didn't really include that here. And then there was Metal Gear Acid. It was a card based game in the Metal Gear Solid universe, but I never played that one. So we're just going to talk about Peace Walker and Portable Ops. So the big thing about the PSP was they were taking what felt like console experiences and putting them in the palm of your hands. And I keep saying Peace Walker. Portable Ops was the introduction into that for me. Uh, it was a Metal Gear Solid story. Uh, I don't remember it was fully voice acted, but it was a full storyline with unique mechanics. So you would go through these levels, and as you knocked out the characters, as you knocked down the enemy soldiers, like when you would knock them out, you could send them back to your base and recruit them to be in your army. And as you recruit, you would like look through their stats, and you would assign them to certain like spots in your oh, excuse me, you would like assign them to certain like the science division or the research division or the weapons division, and they would go off and they would do things to get you like more equipment to do missions easier. And I think that feature carried over into Peace Walker probably, but the difference with Peace Walker was Peace Walker is one of the best Metal Gear Solid games of all time, and I'm pretty sure if you say Peace Walker in a mirror in a dark room 3 times, I'm pretty sure Greg Miller will show up and tell you why it's one of the best games of all time as well. It is just such an the epitome of what the PSP wanted to be. It was a console level Metal Gear game that transcended past what most of the modern Metal Gear Solid games had done at that time, and it was in the palm of your hand. And I'll never forget playing through the entire game, thinking how great it was, and then also getting to the final boss and it just being so difficult that I'm pretty sure I had hacked my PSP at the time and gotten cheats to run on it, and I think that's the only way I beat it. And this is one of the later gen PSPs, so I don't remember how I hacked that one, but what it used to be with the original PSP was you would order a battery off of I don't remember what site it was, but it came from China, and you would pop the battery in, and it would hack the PSP for you. Like you would put in the battery, and it would just ran this program that installed the custom firmware. And yeah, I got in cheats to beat it. But I mean, just speaking on the, continuing on, speaking on the introducing me into series that I had never played before, having console like experiences. When God of War: Chains of Olympus came, I remember when the demo dropped because this is back in the time when you were starting to be able to download demos. But I'm almost certain that somehow I'd gotten a demo. Maybe I'd gotten a demo UMD. I'm gonna have to look up if that was a thing, or if I might be thinking of Metroid Prime Hunters. Um, but yeah, so there was a God of War: Chains of Olympus demo that I played over and over and over and over again, and this had to have been eighth grade, maybe seventh or eighth grade, but I'm pretty sure eighth grade. And I got forced to be on the golf team. I didn't want to be on the golf team. I was forced to do it. And one day we were at the driving range, which was actually my favorite part of being on the golf team because there was no score at the driving range. You were just hitting a ball. They bring you a basket of balls. You'd set it on the green, and you would take your driver out, and you would smack the crap out of it. And you did that until the balls were all gone, and then sometimes they would give you another bucket. And you just hit balls until it's time to go home. And it was like such a big deal that after that was over, I had pre-ordered God of War: Chains of Olympus, and my mom was going to drive us down there. It was like one of the first rated M games she had agreed to get for me. And on one of the last swings, like I twisted something in my back, my 12-year-old back, and I just dropped to the ground because it hurt so bad. So whenever I got home, like I begged my mom, "Can you still go pick up the game? Because I can't move, so it would be really great if you went and got this game for me." So she went to the store. She came back. She had the game, and I played this game obsessively. Uh, if memory serves, it's a very short game. It's like only 5 hours long, and I played the game over and over and over again until I'd completely maxed out all the upgrades for Kratos, and there was nothing more that I could do in the game. I had 100% it, and then the one main issue that I had with the game is there weren't enough. I think there was only three boss fights in the entire game, and then Ghost of Sparta comes out, and it takes Chain of Olympus and it turned it up to 10. It was a way better story, and it was just like it was on par with the PS2 God of Wars, which is that's what the PSP was marketed to do. And just taking a step back from what the PSP was marketed to do, you even go a little bit further. You look at the Final Fantasies that were on this system. Uh, you had Final Fantasy Dissidia, which was this insane 3D fighter where it had all the main characters from all the Final Fantasy games, and then it had all the villains. Uh, I want to say that there was two different versions. And the second version, I think it added lightning, and I'm wondering because I know there's a Steam version of this game now, and I'm wondering if they're still updating it. I'm gonna have to look into that. But and then they made a remake of Final Fantasy Tactics, where they added in these completely beautiful cutscenes, and it was insane what they did with it. Uh, and that was actually my first Final Fantasy Like I'd played Advance, obviously, but I had never played the original game. And Final Fantasy Tactics is just this masterful RPG. And going even further than that, you've got Final Fantasy Crisis Core, which was the prequel to Final Fantasy VII, and the ending of that game absolutely gutting me. I mean, Kingdom Hearts: Birth by Sleep. That was another just a massive game, and I actually have a really good story for this one because not only was it a Kingdom Hearts game through and through with the difficulty to match. I'm pretty sure there were like the bosses towards the end of the game were absolutely infuriating, and it took me like I don't even know, but there was like a robed figure. I think was the final boss in Birth by Sleep, and it might have been a secret boss, not the final boss, but it took me hours. I was probably underleveled, but by the time I had beaten it, like I had, just grinded things out until I was able to just barely squeak by, and I had this massively overleveled character. And I remember the game had some kind of multiplayer mode where you could like you'd go in an arena and you could like fight your friends, and it was really cool. Well, about this time, a friend had bought a PSP and the game, so we had some puppies that we were trying to find homes for. So we had gotten the truck with the puppies. We took them, and we were in the same town, but we couldn't find anybody that was looking for puppies that were like looked like they were trustworthy people. So we drove one town over, and then we get there. One of the puppies starts throwing up all over the kennel. So we're like, well, we're not going to get rid of any of these puppies today. We got to go back. We load all the puppies back in the kennel. Well, we clean the kennel. Don't worry about that. We put them all back in the kennel, and we're on our way back. And the biggest rainstorm I had ever seen uh, in my high school career comes through, and we have to park in this awning. And funnily enough, it was a church. And funnily enough, I actually play in the church band for this church now. And I don't think that the pastor remembers that was me, but it was me. And while we were there, I I beat said friend no more than 40 times before he finally gave up and just took a nap. Because I want to say we were under this awning for 4 hours. And Birth by Sleep, just a fantastic game. And, going back over into the introduction into console experiences, GTA Liberty City Stories and Vice City Stories were both games that, again, I had never gotten to play. I didn't have a PS2, and I had an original Xbox, and my mom wasn't letting me play those games at the time, and GTA 4 wasn't out yet. So I don't remember how I did it, but I convinced her to let me get Liberty City Stories, and I got Vice City Stories a little bit later after that. And they were the 3D GTAs, but they weren't full GTAs, if you get what I mean. Like you couldn't swim. Uh, I know you couldn't swim for sure in Liberty City Stories. I don't know about Vice. I can't remember about Vice City Stories, but it's it was just enough where I was able to go on these rampages through the cities. I was able to drive around listening to the music. The soundtracks are so great in these games. Even if I wasn't mature enough to appreciate them at the time. But I mean, you had burnout games on this thing that were just as good as the PS2 ones. Um, you had Tekken 5 Dark Resurrection was my first Tekken game. And I thought the Devil Jin was like the coolest character of all time. They had the slick cutscenes, and I really loved just going into the free battle mode and going through the arcade mode and just playing around with all the different fighting characters. They had a retelling of the Joan of Arc story. It was a turn-based Final Fantasy Tactics game, and it was called Jeanne d'Arc. That was a really good one. Uh, Killzone Liberation. Now, pretty quickly, people have figured out that while most games could translate over to the handheld from the console, their first-person shooters didn't play too well. But they took Killzone and they gave it a top-down view, and this game was fantastic. It was such a good campaign, and it was one of the first times that I can remember the PSP having getting DLC for a handheld game. And if I remember right, it was a whole nother chapter to the campaign, and it was fantastic. Killzone was fantastic itself, but the DLC was so good, and it had multiplayer, but I don't remember ever getting to play it because I think that by the time that I got Killzone Liberation, the multiplayer was kind of dead. But what was another one? We had the Siphon Filter franchise. We could never forget about that one. Uh, there was Dark Mirror, Logan Shadow, and Combat Ops, and the first of those two had full-fledged campaigns and multiplayer modes. But again, I got in on the tail end where the PSP was never like a booming multiplayer atmosphere. But like if you didn't get in like immediately, the servers kind of dried out. And like with Combat Ops, I was able to find games because I got in as soon as that game launched. But at the same time, it was a digital only game, so like not a whole lot of people played it. Uh, but so Sony Bend made those games, and then they made again. They took a console experience with the Resistance franchise, and they turned it into a third person shooter. And again, this was they were really playing with what they could do with the PSP because you had a fully playable story campaign. It was great. It was one of the it's I would say one of the best PSP games of all time. Uh, and that's saying something because I love the PSP so much. But after you beat the campaign, so you play as a normal guy, and he's got a health bar that does not regenerate. But if you had a copy of Resistance 2 on the PS3, you could plug in your PSP to your PS3 and you would unlock a new game mode where your character would have a really cool black suit and his eyes would glow yellow and you would get a regenerating health bar. So I would plug into that and crank up the difficulty a little bit and like go through multiple playthroughs of this game because again, when they repurposed the franchise for the system, it was a great experience almost every single time. Uh, the first Gran Turismo game I'd ever played was the PSP one, and I mean, Tony Hawk's Underground 2. I think it was the full game, and I'm pretty sure they even had like exclusive PSP stuff. Maybe uh, I don't remember that for sure, but I mean, it was the game that I loved so much that I played on the original Xbox, but I was able to take it wherever I went. Soul Calibur. They had a Soul Calibur on there with Kratos as a playable character. They had what was another SOCOM. Fireteam Bravo 1 and 2, those were great military shooters, but and this is such an unpopular opinion. I loved Bravo Team 3 the most. And I'll tell you why. 1 and 2 had a not it was more of like a pick a mission and go approach. Bravo 3 had a campaign, and this is such a niche thing, but it was a full campaign and you could pick your loadouts before each mission. No matter what loadout you had or if you picked up another gun in the mission, your character would be holding that gun when you got to the cutscene, which is such a that doesn't happen. Like even in AAA games, like they have like a gun, like especially like think about Halo. You know, even in Infinite, no matter what gun that you have, he's always got the assault rifle or the pistol. He doesn't have whatever gun you had in the cutscenes. At least I'm pretty sure he doesn't. Uh, and that being another case of when the Fireteam Bravo 3 demo came out, I played the crap out of that. And there was also a tactics game called Tactical Strike where it was played a lot like XCOM. And just incredible experiences. You just see it over and over again with the PSP. There was Battlefront games on there that worked fantastically. They didn't have all the modes, I don't think, but they had most of them. Uh, Rock Band Unplugged. I can't believe I forgot about that. You played it. Uh, all the different, like you had a drum track, a vocal track, a guitar track, and a bass track, and you would have to play one at a time. And after a certain amount of time, it would say, "Okay, you're done playing guitar. Go over and play drums." And you played it with the face buttons, four face buttons. And if you didn't want to do that, if you didn't want to play it that way, if you just wanted to stick on one instrument, you could enable cheats. Like there was a no fail mode, there was a one instrument mode, just stuff like that. That was really cool. And it had the music shop, which was such a big deal. It was, I think there was like 40 tracks in the game and maybe like 40 DLC tracks they added, which was way more than we thought was going to happen with the PSP. There was insanely good Naruto games on here. I don't know if I told the story or not, but I had uh, before any of the Naruto games had come out on the PSP, the game would end up being Ultimate Ninja Heroes 2 in North America. That game came out way before in Japan, and it was this weird uh, kind of. It was like it was like you had to climb this tower. It's called Phantom Tower, and you would climb the tower, and you had to fight. shadow versions of enemies, and it was a cool story because there was also these really cool like cell shaded cutscenes dispersed throughout where like the characters would do like really cool action sequences. But okay, so that was Ultimate Ninja Heroes 2, right? And in America, I imported the game way before any of the games had come out in the United States, and I played through the entire game. Uh, it was in Japanese entirely, so I just kind of had to guess around what I was doing. I beat the entire game, unlocked all the characters, and then maybe like a year or two after that, Ultimate Ninja Heroes 1 came out in the United States, and it was different because the I want to say the anime hadn't caught up to where it was in Japan yet. So they had to repurpose. They couldn't release Ultimate Ninja Heroes 2 yet. So they made a game that didn't really have a good story mode. I think it maybe had like an arcade mode in it. But like a lot of the characters had to have different special attacks and like different costumes. So for me, it was still worth the price of admission because it was a fresh experience. Then like a year or two after that, Ultimate Ninja Heroes 2 finally came out. I was able to experience that storyline in English. Uh, and after that, we got some Ultimate Ninja Heroes 3, which was Shippuden Ultimate Ninja Heroes. And what was really important about this was I did not get to play Ultimate Ninja 4 and 5. Ultimate Ninja 4 came out in the States on PS2, but Ultimate Ninja 5 did not come out in the States. It came out in Europe. So I didn't really get to experience that one. But Ultimate Ninja Heroes 3 was really cool because it was after the Storm games already come out. So it was a return to the 2D fighting style. And it had a lot of really cool versions of the Shippuden characters. Um, it still had some like awakened forms of playable characters, which is a big rub that I have against the Ultimate Ninja series now. I really hate that it's not in there. Uh, but yeah, and piggybacking, Ultimate Ninja Impact, which was a Dynasty Warriors meets Ultimate Ninja Storm, where like you fought against waves and waves of enemies like a Muso game, but then you also had the cinematic boss fights that were famous for the Ultimate Ninja Storm series, which is a really cool deal. And then there was another one called, I think it was called like Akatsuki Rising, where you played as the Akatsuki. It was a bad game, but I still enjoyed it for what it was. And then we kind of get into the games that weren't critically received well, but I still had a blast with. I mean, there was this game called Infected, which is a really crappy third person shooter, and I have the UMD in my closet. There was Silent Hill Shattered Memories, which was the Silent Hill where you didn't have weapons, you just had to run away from everything. And when you really get down into the nitty gritty of it, it was just a really different experience. Uh, Call of Duty and the Medal of Honor franchise on there. Call of Duty was a really good campaign, but I don't remember anything other than like it was a Call of Duty campaign on the go. It wasn't anything special about it, but the novelty of it was, that's what made it. But then Medal of Honor Heroes 1 and 2, I don't remember the campaigns for these games, but the big draw for me was that you could play multiplayer matches with bots. So I would just play these bot multiplayer matches over and over again, and I just felt like a first person shooter god. Coded Arms, that was the franchise that was on the system, and they were first person shooters. And I guess I should have talked about this with the other FPS games I just talked about. But you would control the movement with your the thumbstick, and the PSP only had one of those, so you would control the looking around with the face buttons. So it wasn't ideal, but it kind of worked. And Coded Arms was like this game where you would go into like this computer world and fight viruses, and it was dumb fun, but I still enjoyed it. And they did not review well for reasons you could probably guess. There was Dante's Inferno, which had a really good PSP port, in my opinion. Ghost Rider had a good PSP port. Manhunt 2, which was really uh, a hot ticket item at the time, but it was fully playable on PSP, and you could go in and get the unedited version, I'm pretty sure, which was a big deal because they had censored the game heavily when it came out. There was a really crappy port of Rainbow Six Vegas that I liked. There was a version of The Sims 2 where it was like an over the shoulder perspective, and it was kind of like a story based game instead of you just like make your own Sims and all that. What was another? Untold Legends 1 and 2, great games. And then there was a Parasite Eve game that always looked really weird, but I never got to play it. Uh, all these experiences just made the PSP what it was. And one of my favorite handhelds that I still, to this day, I will still. Well, no, I bought these games. I can emulate them on my Steam Deck if I want to, and my RG Ally. To this day, I still go back and I play those. I have those experiences, and I think that I always will. And those experiences make what's coming even worse. Because next up, we're going to talk about the PS Vita. The PlayStation Vita, I remember having such potential, right? So, I mean, you had a handheld with an OLED screen. It had 3G capability, so you could get a wireless plan, so you could play this thing wherever you wanted, as long as you had a signal, obviously. I I don't remember how I saved up for this, but I had saved up and I bought this handheld on my own. Dang it. Sorry, I saw something. I bought this handheld on my own and I picked it up on launch day. And I want to say I bought it with Uncharted for sure, but I don't remember if I got anything else with it. I, in my head, I want to say that Resistance, but I don't think Resistance was a launch title. I think it just came out close to launch. Uh, but yeah, and it took things that we wanted the PSP to do. Like it had the second joystick, which was a big deal. We're like, first person shooter games are finally going to just work. And they only one game got that right. There was three major first person shooters. Only one of them did it right. Uh, but yeah, I mean, the, it just had such potential. I was so excited for it. All my friends were excited about it, and I was one of the only. Like I had gotten one, and like two other people that I know of got one. Maybe three. I think there was three because I had a group of friends that we would play PlayStation All Stars and Need for Speed Most Wanted. Uh, but yeah, I mean, it had the potential to be something great, and Sony just kind of sent it out to die because they didn't support it. Um, one of the big killers was were I mean it had a proprietary memory card and they were super overpriced. Uh, but good news now, if you have a PlayStation Vita and you want to still use it, you can you can find one pretty cheap if you look on the internet if you know where to look. And it has never been easier to hack one of these things. You open up the browser and you go. You, you can download the the custom firmware pretty easily from there. And from like there's a store where you can download anything that you want, allegedly. And starting things off for the PS Vita, we're going to start with the game that really propelled it. And like, I mean, it was a system seller. It was the best game on the console. Everybody played it. Persona 4 Golden. It was a port of Persona 4, obviously, but it had a bunch of additional content added onto it. I really want to go back and play this game. I think I'm gonna add it to my list of things that I'm gonna play in the immediate future. But I remember I was going to Canada in the summer of 2013, and I was kind of just looking around for I wanted a game to play on the plane ride because it's going to be a long plane ride. So I was going. The plane was going to be Lake Charles to Houston, Houston to Cleveland, and then Cleveland to Ontario. I think either I always can't remember if it was Ontario. I think it was on. Yeah, it was Ontario. Uh, so I wanted a game that was pretty beefy, right? And I did not think that I was going to. I didn't think I was going to play it that much before the trip. So I'm looking, and everybody's looking. Persona 4, Persona 4, Persona 4. So I buy the game like 3 weeks before the plane ride, right? Anybody that's played Persona games know how lengthy they are. This game completely and totally took over my life. I loved the characters. I loved the gameplay. I loved the story. Uh, but as anybody that can play the games know, you there are certain, like especially in Persona 5 Royal, and I don't remember if there was a moment where you could really mess up the story in Persona 3 Reload. I never played the original Persona 3 either. AirPods in while I'm recording this podcast, so it really scared the crap out of me. Uh, but yeah, so I picked the bad option. I picked wrong. I didn't get the good ending in the game, and like it's been enough time to where I could go back and play the game without remembering a good 95% of the story beats. Uh, but I mean, going from there, you have Killzone Mercenary, which we're gonna go ahead and knock out all the first person shooters. We're gonna talk about Resistance Retribution first because that was my first heartbreak because it was I was super excited because at this point I had played Resistance 2. I loved Resistance 2. Um, I played Resistance 3, but for some reason it didn't click with me and I never finished it. And I never played Resistance 1 because it was at like the very beginning of the PS3 life cycle and I hopped into the PS3 at the end of the console's life, so I just never really got into it. I'll take a sip of some real quick. Uh, so and loving Resistance Retribution so much on the PSP, and then they're saying that this is going to be a full fledged Resistance game. Uh, it comes out, and I'll never forget going to seeing reviews are live and going to the IGN review. And I'm pretty sure it was Greg Miller, and I think he gave it a 5, and my heart sinking. And then all the other reviews were coming in and saying it was bad. And it was like the Resident Evil 6 syndrome, where I was like, I liked Resident Evil 6, the critics didn't, they're wrong. And then I remember playing the game. It was super short. It didn't play well, and just being so disappointed. And it was one of those things where I still have my PlayStation Vita, by the way, and I pulled it out and I downloaded Resistance again. And I was like, maybe I just remember the game wrong, and I did not remember it wrong. It was just not a good game. And then Call of Duty Black Ops Declassified coming out, me and my friends buying it, and we were playing multiplayer matches, but it just wasn't good. The multiplayer wasn't good. The campaign was just these weird stitched together missions that nobody cared about. But then we get Killzone Mercenary. And at this point, we were all kind of jaded about the first person shooters. We were getting jaded about the PS Vita. Killzone Mercenary comes out. It looks fantastic. The campaign was great. The multiplayer was great. And just having a fantastic time. Then we get Minecraft on the Vita and having Minecraft and you know you heard how much I love Minecraft from the episode that I did by the 360. Having that as a portable thing was so great. Then we had the Mortal Kombat 9. The full game was on there, and I remember having. I'm pretty sure that the game when it came out on Vita, I think all the DLC characters were already added in. So like playing as Freddy Krueger was just a blast. Uh, Walking Dead season 1, I played on the Vita. I'm pretty sure, and that game, just broke my heart. Guacamelee. Oh, Uncharted. That being, I had played all the Uncharted games, and uh, Golden Abyss was fine, but it wasn't what I wanted. And they had a bunch of weird stuff with the PS Vita's touchpad. It had a touchpad on the back, which is really weird. And like there were things where you had to like blow on the system to like blow dust off of stuff. It was just stupid. And let's see, Need for Speed Most Wanted being a really good Need for Speed racing game on the system that I played a lot with my friends. Borderlands 2 had a serviceable port, but the performance was bad. Uh, it had a bunch of PS2 ports. So, like, that was my entrance into the PS2 since I didn't really ever have one. You could MGS 2 and 3, Sly Cooper, Jack and Daxter, God of War, Final Fantasy 10 and 10 2. There was a Ninja Gaiden Sigma was on on the handheld. Then you had Street Fighter Cross Tekken. You had Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3, Unit 13, Assassin's Creed Liberation. Uh, but none of these games, and I mean none of them, touch how much fun I had with PlayStation All Stars. I just, to this day, I haven't found a game that really grabbed me as much on the PlayStation. Like, I mean, obviously, Persona 4 Gold and Killzone Mercenary were those games, right? But I just had so much fun with PlayStation All Stars because it was a game that I only played with my friends. Uh, and those experiences have stuck with me to this day. And I'll always remember some of the fun times that I had getting into a party and queuing up for online matches against other players. It's something that I never got with Super Smash Brothers because the online play was always so horrible. Uh, but yeah, I actually didn't think I was going to be this long on the tooth on the PSP and the PS Vita. I mean, I guess I should have anticipated it, but I just did not. So this is probably going to end up being a four-parter instead of a three-parter. So next, in part three, we're going to talk about the 3DS and see how far we get. Maybe we'll talk about the Switch. Or, you know what? I'll do the 3DS and then I'll go a step further and talk about the NVIDIA Shield. If you don't remember that, we'll talk about it next week or whenever this comes out. We'll talk about it in part three. Uh, as always, I'm really glad to be able to do these essay like episodes of the podcast. If you have any kind of topic that you guys want to hear me talk about, uh, just be sure to reach out to the email or on our socials, and we'll do those for you. Thanks for listening, guys, and I will see you next time.